The control tower's last flickering transmission dissolved into static dot high above the chaos. As emergency satellites blinked off one by one, and radio silence rippled across the stratosphere, Elena sat alone in the cockpit, her gloved hand hovering above the manual override. No one else could fly through this, and they all knew it. She wasn't supposed to be here, not in this chair, not on this tarmac, not on this base. Official records said Elena Sharp had been decommissioned 2 years ago, medically cleared from all air duty rosters due to a non-progressive retinal degeneration, a bureaucratic term that meant too old, too slow, too likely to miss the shot. But she'd been reading solar telemetry every morning for weeks. And the readings were wrong. Now the sun was spitting ionized hellfire toward Earth like a loaded gun, and her old flight suit stitched back together by hand with old patches and memory was the only one left that wouldn't lock her out. The command post's steel door hissed open. She turned. Lieutenant Marsh stood there, young, square-jawed, tapping a tablet nervously. He looked like every other man on base, overconfident, underinformed, and a little too eager to prove her wrong. "You can't seriously be thinking about flying the 517, he said. "You're not even cleared. That thing hasn't been tested for real-time CME distortion." "Neither has your team," she said, tightening her gloves. "And I built the damn shield mesh that makes it fly." He flinched. Just a little. Elena moved past him, slow and deliberate. Outside, solar wind had begun to streak visibly across the sky, curling in serpentine streaks of green and gold, like the aurora had been set on fire. Base personnel were running now toward bunkers, shelters, reinforced chambers. Toward safety. She walked the other way, toward the hangar, toward the storm. 20 years ago, she'd flown reconnaissance over sand and fire while insurgents jammed every signal but the heartbeat of her own mind. 10 years ago, she'd taught a room full of overarmed boys how to land without automated assist. She hadn't stopped flying. The world had just stopped watching. The V-17 was massive, sleek in a way only function could shape, matte black with sharp wings that folded like a bird's before unfurling mid-flight. The kind of machine that didn't require a pilot anymore. Unless something broke. Unless everything broke. Elena climbed into the cockpit. The biometric scanner blinked red. Denied. She pulled out a screwdriver. The override took 12 seconds. She knew because she counted them. Her father taught her to count under pressure. Her mother taught her where the fail-safes were buried. She slid into the chair like she'd never left it. The control stick felt familiar. Like home. The launch bay roared. As the doors unsealed, Marsh's voice crackled in her ear. "Elena Sharp, you have no authority to launch. You'll be court-martialed." "You'll static swallowed him," she smiled, quietly. "Good." The V-17 lifted into the boiling sky. Below, the last satellite feed showed flare waves erupting from the sun's surface, megaton arcs of plasma leaping like spears from an angry god. The ionosphere was already compromised. GPS was gone. Communications were next, but Elena didn't need GPS. She had stars. She had instinct. She had the one thing no algorithm could teach. The refusal to crash. The mission wasn't just flight, it was extraction. A research team outpost stationed in northern Greenland, doing high-latitude climate modeling, hadn't answered in 6 hours. They were inside the flare zone. The last message read, "We see flames in the sky. No response from HQ. Batteries dying. Please advise." That had been 6 hours ago. The storm would blind satellites for another 12. If someone didn't reach them before then, they'd freeze, or worse, disappear under the polar convergence like so many others. Elena keyed the manual nav. The cockpit dimmed. Went red, solar shielding at 90%. She could barely see the horizon now. Instruments flickered. Altitude, pitch, gyros, everything was starting to spin, drunk from solar interference. She flew by hand. She flew by field. At 50,000 feet. The flare wall hit. The V-17 shook like a dying beast. The left engine cut. Elena rerouted through bypass systems even Marsh probably didn't know existed. Heat warnings. Flash. Cabin pressure dropped. The cockpit frostlined in seconds. Her fingers moved like they remembered being young. The wings flattened. The craft stabilized. She thought about her mother, a field medic in Aleppo. Once treated a collapsed lung with a ballpoint pen and a whiskey straw. They said she was too soft for deployment. Until she saved a commander's son. Then she got a medal. Then they forgot her name again. Elena touched the Arctic Circle at sunrise, which wasn't sunrise. It was firelight. Auroras the size of continents danced across the stratosphere, but there was no power. The outpost signal was dead. Ice radar showed movements, small, faint, clustered roughly 3 clicks northwest of grid point Bravo. She dropped altitude. No auto assist. Just wind. Muscle. Will. Then dash there. A flare. Not solar human. She landed on raw ice. The skids bit into powder. She unstrapped and stepped out into the breath-freezing silence. 6 figures in orange thermal gear ran toward her. One collapsed halfway. She caught him. Barely 20. Fingers blackening. Eyes wide. "We thought no one was coming," he gasped. "Good," she said. "That's what made it possible." The return flight took hours, and most of her shielding, and a chunk of the V-17's undercarriage. But she landed. Hard. On scorched tarmac, now full of cheering personnel, shocked scientists, and more cameras than she'd seen in a decade. Marsh was there too, mouth open. Tablet forgotten. He stepped forward. How did you?" Elena removed her helmet, hair damp. Eyes steady. "I never stopped flying," she said. Drop if you've ever been underestimated. Tag someone who needs to hear this today. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The second the debriefing room door shut behind her, Elena knew this wasn't going to be a thank you ceremony. It smelled too sterile. Too cold. Too much like a trap. She stood alone under the blinding fluorescent ceiling while a panel of 4 officers, 2 from logistics, 1 from signals, and 1 with the hard jaw of legal sat behind a black metal table like it was a trial, not a recovery mission aftermath. Only 1 seat faced them. She didn't take it. Colonel Vaden, head of disaster operations, finally looked up. "Miss Sharp, you were not authorized to fly. You accessed secure hangar equipment without clearance. You launched a top-tier military asset against direct advisement." Elena folded her arms. "And I brought 6 people back alive. No one responded." "You're welcome." Vaden set his pen down, careful, deliberate. "That's not what this is about." "Sure it is. You're just afraid to say it out loud." One of the logistics men, Captain Mears, according to the lapel tag, cleared his throat. "You bypassed federal override codes. The V-17 is prototype hardware. The consequences would have been 6 dead scientists and a PR scandal frozen in a glacier," she said. "Let's not pretend I was flying for medals." The man from signals flinched slightly. Legal Commander Rhodes remained stone-faced. "You understand, Miss Sharp, that what you did sets a precedent." "No," she said. "What I did was prevent your satellites from needing body counts. Don't confuse survival with symbolism." That left a silence so long you could hear the hum of the AC vents. Then, dismissed. Elena arched a brow. "That's it?" Vaden didn't blink. "You'll be contacted." Outside, the sun glared hot and wrong above the hangars. She slid her aviators on, jaw tight. Marsh was waiting by the shadow of the fuel tower, trying not to look like he'd been pacing. He handed her a wrapped ration bar. "I figured you hadn't eaten." She took it, bit the corner. "Thanks." "You're not in trouble, are you?" She chewed, slowly. "Not officially. But they'll want to leash me. Or bury me in a task force. Something bureaucratic. He hesitated. You scared the hell out of everyone, you know. She looked out over the tarmac where the V-17 sat half covered in thermal tarps, battered but intact. Good. That's how you know it mattered. The next morning, she was summoned to Hangar Delta. It wasn't the normal kind of call. A man waited there with no name on his uniform, no rank on his collar, and a tablet that auto-locked every time she blinked too long. "Miss Sharp," he said, voice even, "we have a situation." She didn't sit. Again, define situation. He turned the tablet toward her. The video feed was patchy, degraded, but unmistakable. A stratospheric drone, fully autonomous, tumbling out of formation somewhere over the upper Andes. "Storm blew out 2 of its guidance relays," he said. "We need someone who can get up there and patch the 3rd before it crashes." Elena blinked. "You want me to intercept a falling drone?" Mid-air, mid-spin. In the same atmospheric currents that nearly melted your canopy yesterday. "Why me?" He didn't smile. "Because your override worked. Because you're not scared of manual flight. And because, frankly," she raised a brow, "no one else on this hemisphere has the stones to try." That's how she ended up in the flight. Hangar again, 72 hours later, staring down the nose of a retrofitted XR-90. It was old tech. Analog controls. Non-automated stabilizers. Heavy. It was also perfect. She climbed into the cockpit. The technician checking the fuselage wiring looked barely 20. Ma'am, you need help calibrating?" "No, but you need to reground the inertial dampers. You're about to wire it into feedback loops." He flushed. Fumbled the tools. She shook her head and flipped the cockpit display to raw data stream. No overlays, no predictive assist, just readouts. "That's how you want it?" Marsh asked from below. She nodded. "I need to feel every meter, not guess. You're gonna try to land on it, aren't you? That drone's the size of a garbage truck." "I'm not landing, I'm docking." At 38,000 feet, turbulence became an abstract concept. The XR-90 bucked like a bronco as the edge of the polar flare remnant tugged at its flaps. Elena gritted her teeth. She kept manual throttle, adjusting the pitch a single half degree at a time. The drone appeared on radar at 9:0 clock. Spinning. Bleeding altitude. She matched its fall, then eased ahead. If she timed it wrong, she'd shear the XR in half. If she timed it right, she throttled down, then suddenly inverted. The world flipped. The drone passed under no. Above dasher. She engaged clamp. Arms. Lock. She exhaled for the first time in minutes. The XR's undercarriage now bore the full weight of the drone. Metal groaned. She kept her speed steady, held the drift, inched toward neutral descent. Marsh's voice hissed over the line. "I'm reading you at 6% power draw. You need to drop it. The XR is gonna overheat." "Not yet," she said. "We drop this over lowland. It takes out a village. You'll cook the airframe. Then I'll fly it cooler. Altitude, 23,000. Then 2-1. Air density started to thicken. The drone's spin began to slow. She could see scorch patterns on its hull now. The solar flare had cooked its top sensors. She rerouted the patch cord through a manual interface jamming, a cable through the XR's rear console, and jerry-rigging a bridge via an old weather pod jack. She never told anyone. She designed the fail-safe firmware because no one ever asked. The green light flashed. Signal regained. Drone stabilized. It disengaged. Fell away cleanly. Its own wings unfolded and caught the current. The XR jolted without the weight. Elena jerked the stick. Corrected. Breathless. But alive. She landed to silence. Then a roar. The hangar was full. Marsh, the tablet guy. Even Vaiden. None of them spoke for the first 30 seconds. Then the young tech from before whispered, She just caught a drone. In the sky. Vaden stepped forward. You'll be leading the next wave. Elena narrowed her eyes. What wave? He handed her a sealed file. She opened it and saw the map and saw the red zone, and saw what the solar storm had awakened. Droppa, if you believe instinct still matters. Tag someone who needs to trust themselves more. Let's keep flying together. Want to see what Elena finds next? Stay tuned for part 3. The sealed folder felt healthy in Elena's hands as she stepped into the situation room. The map inside glowed faintly under the lamplight, clusters of crimson pulsing over global coordinates. Each pulse marked instability zones triggered by the solar storm. Each zone threatened to collapse under cascading geomagnetic flux. As Colonel Vaden cleared his throat, Elena realized the stakes had grown far beyond the Arctic rescue. This was now a planetary emergency. Ms. Sharp, Vaden began, lips tight, eyes unreadable. We've identified 10 sites where critical infrastructure will fail in the next 48 hours. Power grids, water purification centers, research stations, everything. You're being assigned as mission lead for Operation Fluxwarden. The words landed like a surprise thunderbolt. She inhaled slowly, scanning the room. Marsh, standing rigid. The unnamed liaison, face obscured. And a new figure at the table, General Cardinia, emblem glinting on her breastplate. Operation Fluxwarden, the general said, voice calm but brittle. Our objective is to deploy rapid response units to each red zone, stabilize geomagnetic shields, and restore satellite uplinks. We don't have time for automated drones. You'll assemble and lead all piloted sorties. Elena's mind flashed through protocols, schedules, supply manifests. 10 zones, each requiring a bespoke flight, some in desert heat waves, others in polar night. How many pilots do we have standing by? Vaden's eyes flicked to Marsh. Marsh swallowed. There are 6 certified pilots available, 4 XR types. 2 V-17s, but only you have proven manual override capability under high ion conditions. So I'll go first, she said. Voice steady. General Cardinia's gaze sharpened. No, you coordinate flights from here. But you'll personally lead the first mission to Sector Alpha, Northern Mongolia. The plateau's geomagnetic shield generator is offline. Without it, the entire grid in that region will collapse within 18 hours. Elena nodded. Every logistical parameter slamming into place. Fuel weight, heat shielding, ion-resistant avionics. She closed the folder. When do we launch? 2 hours. Vaden tapped an earpiece. Prep Hangar Bravo. Down in Hangar Bravo, pit crews moved. Like choreographed ants around the V-17, flames roared in plasma torches, welding fresh shielding plates onto the fuselage. Technicians hunched over consoles, calibrating the advanced geomantic compensator, Elena's own design, recently declassified. For field use. She climbed into the cockpit and ran her fingers along the latch. Marsh joined her at the canopy, voice low. You sure about this? When your back's against the sun, you adapt or you burn. She checked the manual override port, wired and sealed by her hands. Ladies first. Marsh hesitated, then hit the ignition. Sequence. The V-17 rumbled, alive with potential. Moments later, the hangar doors parted. Outside, the plateau of Kungai Mountains stretched, barren peaks pierced by auroral flares. Wind currents danced heat and cold, a maelstrom that shredded meteorological models. Elena's breath caught in her throat. This was why she never stopped flying. For moments like this, when survival hinged on split-second choices, she eased the V-17 forward, sensors scanning the horizon. Sector Alpha's coordinates pulsed on the HUD, 48.5 N. 99.0 E shield generator tower loomed distant, a silhouette against the burning sky. She throttled up and lifted off. At 5,000 feet. The first magnetic wave hit. Instruments screamed static. Hull plating hummed. Elena's knuckles went white around the stick. The V-17 pitched violently. She cut the auto-correction and switched to manual link. The cockpit flickered. The HUD went black, only raw data feeds blinking on side consoles. She breathed, counted. 1.2, .3, then measured each corrective pulse. Roll, yaw, pitched tiny arcs of counterforce. The V-17 steadied. Report. Marsh's voice crackled over comms. Hold 5,000 feet. Stabilization at 20%. Proceeding to intercept geomagnetic crest. A screeching whine filled the sky as the V-17 pierced the crest, a ribbon of pure ion. Flux stretching across the plateau, instrument readings spiked. Shield capacitors charged dangerously. Elena initiated manual shield sync, rerouting excess load through the aft vanes. Lightning arcs crackled along the wing edges. The V-17's engines roared in protest. Ahead, the generator tower stood illuminated by plasma storms. She steered toward it. Droppa, if you're hanging on by skill and guts. Tag someone who embraces the unknown. Part 3 continues. Elena's fight against the storm. Let me know when you're ready for Part 4. The first mission out of Flux Warden Command took her deep into the Mongolian mountains. Sector Alpha. The geomagnetic storm hadn't just crippled the region's communications grid. It had birthed a phantom pressure wave disrupting everything. From compass readings to artificial horizon gauges, Elena touched down in the makeshift relay zone 20 clicks south of the collapsed shielding tower. Dust swirled in chaotic eddies around the skids. As she stepped out, 3 engineers ran toward her, their breath visibly fogging in the high-altitude air. "We weren't expecting a pilot," one shouted. "They said they'd send a drone." "Drones can't improvise," Elena replied. They led her to a temporary command tent where emergency gear flickered under dim battery power. One map lay pinned to the center table. Power routes, black zones, potential collapses. A tall man with a scar across his temple introduced himself as Dr. Salanov. The shielding tower took a direct CME hit. Surge fried every internal circuit. Capacitor banks are ruined. Can you bypass them? Only if we rebuild the path using external conduits. He pointed to a jagged red route on the map. But those cables weigh nearly 70 kilos a segment. The terrain's impassable by vehicle. "Then I'll fly them," Elena said. He blinked. "Fly them how? We don't have lifter drones here." "I'll re-rig the V-17 with an underslung harness. Manual balance, one segment at a time," he stared. "That's insane. You'd be riding the crest of the storm every trip." She looked at the ash-colored sky. "I've done worse." The first run nearly tore the wings off. Even with reduced thrust and stabilized pitch, carrying that much copper through gale force magnetically charged winds felt like dragging an anchor through a tornado. The second trip, she clipped a ridge. The third, she barely missed a power line remnant arcing blue from a downed transformer dot. But by the fourth, the pattern began to settle. She adjusted pitch 4 degrees higher on the west crosswind, slowed throttle through the upper valley. Let the air do some of the work. 8 trips, 4 hours. No autopilot. No margin for error. Dr. Salanov radioed from the tower. Final segment in place. Charge relays are live, initializing. Elena hovered nearby, waiting. Then the tower lit. A low pulse radiated outward in a ring of light, pushing the ambient dust into a circular gust. The storm noise dropped. GPS blinked. Back to life. Power surged down ancient grid lines. Sector Alpha was alive, but her job wasn't done. She was already airborne again 30 minutes later, redirected mid-flight to Sector Delta, Baffin Island, Canada. The ice station there had sent a fragmented signal before vanishing, something about magnetic inversion and internal tremors. "You'll land directly on the ice shelf," Vaden's voice said over secure line. "There's a risk of collapse." Do not exit your craft until seismic scan confirms weight tolerances. Understood. The Arctic was not unfamiliar to her, but this time, it was louder. The V-17 groaned as the storm battered the fuselage, with cold pressure that made metal sound like bone. She switched to radar altimeter feed. The shelf was visible only as a ghost under the scan. She touched down. No crunch. No crack. She held still, then reached for the seismic scanner. Static. Too much interference. And then, she saw them, 3 figures in red coats waving from behind a snow ridge. Alive. She moved. She hovered close enough to deploy a rescue winch. One figure latched on, then another. But the third stumbled. Then the ice cracked. The shelf groaned and splintered. Alina dropped the winch to its lowest reach. Against protocol. Hold on, she shouted. The last scientist leapt. Grabbed the line. She reversed thrust. The shelf shattered beneath them. A wall of water and snow rose. But she pulled them out. All of them. 2 zones stabilized. 6 lives saved. 1 aircraft nearly totaled. And command had begun to shift. General Cardinia met her in person as she landed on her 3rd sortie, this one into South Africa's Karoo Basin. "We need you to stop being the emergency fix," the general said, tone cool. "Then stop creating emergencies." Cardinia didn't smile. "We're forming a rapid response wing, a permanent one. You'll command it." Elena peeled off her gloves. "And if I say no, then the next person we send won't come back. Drop a, if you've ever been the only one who could do the job. Tag someone who always shows up when others won't. Part 4 complete. Ready to continue the storm front? Let me know when to begin Part 5. The new wing didn't have a name yet. It didn't have a logo or a budget or even a designated barracks. But it had her. And in the early hours of Day 7, when the next surge came down from the sun like a wave of molten teeth, it had a job. 4 simultaneous failures. 4 pilots ready. Elena stood at the edge of the tarmac beneath floodlights as hot wind swept grit across her boots. Marsh handed her a comlink. "We've got cascade loss in the Aegean grid, ion reflection failures in Sudan, a reactor cool-down fail in Brazil, and a polar tracking outage over Alaska. And only 4 craft," she said, already calculating. "They want to prioritize Brazil. Civilian exposure risk is high." "No," she said. "We split risk, 1 per site. I'll take Sudan." Marsh hesitated. "That's the highest flux density." "Exactly. I can fly without the fancy screens. Can the rest of them?" He didn't answer. The XR-90 bucked sideways 3 minutes after takeoff. Desert heat combined with storm swell made the wind shear unpredictable. Elena cut throttle to half, rode it sideways for 3 kilometers, then realigned along the backup telemetry heading. Her hands didn't leave the stick. The closer she got to the Sudanese node, the clearer the signs of failure appeared. Entire towns dark under moonlight, transformers glowing like dying coals. And above them, flickering in the sky, arcs of magnetic lightning leaping from cloud to cloud. She keyed her headset. "Fluxwarden base. This is sharp. Nearing target. Interference high. Going dark." Then she switched to silent protocol. The shielding node was underground. To reach it, she had to land in open desert and trek 300 meters with a ground unit battery no heavier than a suitcase, but twice as volatile as jet fuel. The winds howled like banshees, sand grated between her goggles and skin. But she reached the hatch. She keyed the access code. The lock WHINED. Inside, stale air pressed against her. And a voice said, "You're not supposed to be here." She froze. A man stepped from the inner stairwell. Local engineer. Name badge read Yazer. He held a pulse rifle, relaxed but only slightly. They said the site was off limits. "We were told to wait. While the grid collapses? While command decides. What lives are worth saving?" She opened the battery case. "I'm not command. I'm the one who doesn't wait." He stared, then finally nodded. Then come on, it's below. They descended. The control room was dark. Emergency lights painted the consoles red. Static crawled across the screens. Yasser moved fast, plugging in diagnostic gear. Cores intact. Interfaces scrambled. Manual interface still active? He nodded. She got to work. 30 minutes later, the node pulsed back to life. The storm began to soften. And in the northern sky, other lights flickered distant, synchronized, blinking green. Other pilots had succeeded. Alina limped back across the sand alone. Halfway to the XR, her comlink chirped. Sharp, this is Marsh. Repeat, Sharp, do you read? Loud and clear. Command's got a problem. Bigger than the storms. She paused. Go on. One of our deep sensor satellites picked up a signal from L5. Lagrange point 5. A stable gravitational pocket used by satellites. What kind of signal? Unidentified tech. A structure moving against solar wind. She narrowed her eyes. Artificial? Almost definitely. Hours later, back at base, she was debriefed in a darkened chamber lined with classified projection arrays. General Cardinia stood in front of a holomap, arms crossed. The object, whatever it was drifting in solar orbit, just outside Earth's shielding corridor. It survived the flare, Cardinia said, which means it wasn't built by us. Alina studied the scan. Angular, cold, too symmetrical for space junk. You think it caused the storm? We think it came because of the storm. Or it's what the storm flushed out. Command decided to send an observation drone. The drone vanished. Twice. They sent a manned recon crew. No return. Then they turned to Elena. Drop. If you've ever faced something no one else dared to, tag someone who always shows up when it gets real. Wanna see what's hiding beyond the sun's light. Tell me when you're ready for part 6. The mission wasn't called anything. No codey name, no patch, no ceremony. Just Elena in the hangar again, strapping into an XR-90 reinforced, repainted, and rebuilt with shielding meant for a star's tantrum. Marsh stood beside her, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. They're calling this suicide behind closed doors. Not suicide, she said. Contact, he swallowed. Cardinia's giving you 72 hours. If you're not back by then, I won't be. She reached for the final latch. I'll be somewhere else. He looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. Instead, he stepped back, raised a gloved hand, and saluted. She didn't salute back. She flew. The launch trajectory was unconventional, looping out past lunar orbit, using Earth's gravity. As a slingshot. It saved fuel. It burned nerves. The cockpit was nearly dark. Only deep red data streams filtered through solar dampers. Every 20 seconds, the entire frame buzzed from electromagnetic pressure, like a whisper through steel bones. By hour 6, the stars began to vanish, not from light pollution, from radiation. Occlusion. Like something behind her was blotting them out. She toggled the solar tilt. Stabilizers. The XR-90R rebalanced. The onboard log blinked. Distance from L5, 1,200 kilometers. Object in range. Her hands tightened. Then the display went black. Not failed. Disabled. The XR coasted now, powered by drift and trust. Her suit lights flicked to minimal reserve. And then, it appeared. Not in front of her. Below. A shadow in the void. Bigger than any satellite. Smooth. Angled. Surfaces that shouldn't exist in nature, symmetrical. Down to the meter. The object rotated once. No lights. No heat signature. But her proximity. Alarm blinked once. Then again. Then an aperture opened. She wasn't afraid. She was something deeper. Alert. Tuned, the way you are before a shot that counts. The XR drifted closer. Nudged by unseen force. The aperture widened, revealing a tunnel. She didn't fight it. Didn't touch the controls. Let it take. Her. Inside, light returned, but not from bulbs. The walls shimmered with low-frequency pulses, like sound made visible. The XR halted in mid-air. Weightless. Elena unstrapped, floated toward the hatch. Pressurized override still worked. She touched the sequence. The door opened. The air didn't. Escape, because there was air inside. Warm. Metallic. Familiar. She stepped out. Not onto a floor, onto a field. Artificial grass underfoot. A sky above that mirrored the last clear day. She remembered before the flares. Impossible. She turned and saw them. Humanoid silhouettes. Not human. Taller. No visible joints. Faces like polished obsidian. One step forward. Spoke. Not aloud, but in her head. You are the first to return. She froze. Return? Your world storm broke the veil. We have been waiting since the last sunburn. What are you? Witnesses, architects. You built us before you forgot. I don't understand. You will. A panel opened. Inside. Images. Of Earth. Past. Future. Overlapping. One showed Elena. Older. Leading others, wearing the same XR suit. But behind her, a different planet. A different sky. What is this? A timeline breached. The storms are not punishment. They are signals, gateways, keys, and me? You are the bridge. She staggered back. The field beneath her rippled. The sky changed. Suddenly. She was in a storm again, groundside, surrounded by people screaming. Power dying. Machines burning. Then the image vanished. She was back in the chamber. The being stood closer now. Do not fear truth. Do not run from origin. We have waited. You have returned. Now choose. Return to your world and warn them, or stay and unlock what lies beyond. She stared. Heart steady. Breath slow. I'll return. But not to warn them, to prepare them. Drop a, if you've ever felt like something was calling you higher. Tag someone who believes they were meant for more. Want to see what she brings back. Let me know when you're ready for part 7. The return trip wasn't tracked. It wasn't supposed to be possible. But just under 41 hours after departure, Elena's XR-90R reappeared on long-range scope, silent, intact, and descending in a stable spiral toward Fluxwarden Airfield. By the time she touched down, every satellite pinged back online. And a second flare larger than the first had just missed Earth by 12,000 kilometers. Inside the cockpit, Elena's helmet remained sealed. She didn't open it until General Cardinia herself walked out onto the tarmac, hand raised against the floodlights. The canopy hissed. Elena climbed out. You made it back, Cardinia said, voice flat, almost afraid to believe it. I wasn't the first to go there, Elena said. But I'm the first to come back, Cardinia frowned. From where? What did you see? Elena looked up at the sky stars scattered across black velvet, the solar edge still faintly humming with red. A mirror. They tried to debrief her in the usual way. Cameras, transcripts, files. Marked eyes only. She told them what they could handle: structure, contact, visual confirmation of an artificial object. Atmospheric data inconsistent with any Earth-based engineering. She omitted what mattered. She did not mention the beings, nor the choice she'd made. Not yet. Because something had changed. Inside her. Out there. That night, Elena stood alone in the briefing dome, watching archived solar flare footage. A faint whine echoed overhead. She turned. Marsh entered, tablet in hand. Commands quiet. Too quiet. They're spooked. Good. He approached slowly. You're not. The same. I never was. He hesitated. You're forming a new unit. Cardinia approved it. You're going to need more pilots. More people like you. She nodded. Not just pilots, translators, engineers, architects, healers, the kind who adapt. He looked at her. We going somewhere? She handed him a file. Inside, a map of solar corridors. One blinked green dot beyond Jupiter. In the following weeks, Elena led sorties not to fix but to learn. The storm hadn't just damaged infrastructure. It had pulled back a veil, some flare zones. Revealed strange mineral deposits arranged in geometric patterns that weren't natural. Others contained sound frequencies inaudible to human ears but powerful enough to disable electronics. In one instance, a wind turbine in Tasmania began generating power again, though it hadn't been connected to any grid in over a decade. The storms weren't just destruction. They were signals. Messages. And Earth was only starting to hear them. Then came the child, 5 years old, found in the aftermath of a field collapse near Lake Baikal. No known parents. No injury. But when Elena stepped into the tent where the doctors had taken him, he looked up. And said, clearly, in a voice that wasn't just his, "You kept your promise. Everything." Froze. Doctors stared. Elena knelt slowly. "Where are you from?" The boy's eyes shimmered, not with tears, with light. "I am from after," she exhaled. "Are there others?" He nodded. "Waiting. Watching. They know now." The bridge held. That night, Cardinia summoned her. "Is it true?" she asked. No bluster now, just fear. Elena nodded. "What do we do?" Elena looked down at her flight gloves, still stained from Sudan's dust. "We listen, we learn, we prepare." A new center was built off books, high altitude, buried under mountain ice. Not for war, for contact. Elena trained teams in resilience, improvisation, instinct. Not for storms, but for what comes after. And the stars above began to shift. If you feel like the world is more than it seems, tag someone who believes in second chances. Part 7 is done. The bridge held. Let me know when you're ready for Part 8. The first message didn't arrive in code. It came as song. A harmonic tremor, rising from beneath the magnetic field station in Argentina. Engineers thought it was interference, a weather anomaly, until Elena heard it. She stepped into the underground lab, alone as the sound played through the speakers. Layers of deep bass hums, overlaid by flickering frequencies. Too perfect to be random. Too ancient to be new. She closed her eyes. And for a moment, she saw not cables or steel, but stars folding inward. Patterns looping in 6-point symmetry. Spirals embedded within spirals. Then she whispered, "It's not sound, it's memory." The boy, the one from Lake Baikal, had drawn it the night before. 6 loops intersecting at angles that made no architectural sense. When asked, he'd simply said, "It's where the first door was." Now that pattern matched the audio frequencies. Not a coincidence. A map. 3 days later, the first team descended into the Andes. Elena led it. The pattern had pointed there. Fault line long assumed dead. But seismic equipment showed rhythmic pulses, precisely every 108 seconds. "Heartbeat," Elena said quietly. Marsh stood beside her, helmet already fogging. "Of what?" She didn't answer, because deep below the ice-choked cave system, they found the door. Not stone, not metal, but something between. Alive. Pulsing. 6-point. Geometry embedded like bone into the walls. She stepped forward. It opened. They entered. A space that didn't obey distance. The cave opened into a chamber wider than the cliff it was under. Light came from nowhere. Shadows moved wrong. At its center, a column, spinning slowly, covered in etched patterns, like the boy's drawings. As she approached, her tablet went dead. So did her flashlight, but not her, because the song returned. Inside, her bones. Then the column split. And a projection unfolded. Images. Planets burning, skies breaking. And then hands reaching across time. Earth, shattered once, reborn again, and Elena standing between them. In every version, when it ended, the team stood silent. Marsh finally whispered, "What the hell was that?" A message or a warning, maybe both. She looked back at the boy's drawing. There were 6 doors, only one had opened. Fluxwarden became global. They dropped the name. Now it was simply the Bridge Corps, a coalition, not of governments, but of those who'd been changed by the storm. People who'd seen the patterns, heard the song, felt the shift. They found the second door in Namibia, third beneath the Greenland ice sheet. Each one told a piece of the same story. Earth had fallen before. Humanity had built monuments to survive. Then they'd forgotten. At night, Elena sat by herself, listening to the harmonics. Each door changed them, gave them new frequencies. Each one resonated with part of her past, her mother's voice, her father's cadence, the echo of a cockpit alarm from a forgotten mission. She began to dream of places she'd never flown and wake with coordinates. She didn't question it. But then, the seventh flare came. It wasn't predicted. It didn't follow solar patterns. And it was local. Elena felt it before the sensors did. In her chest, like gravity, shifting. Power grids went dark. Satellites spun off course. And at the center of the blackout, Antarctica, the final door. The place even the song refused to name. She stood at the edge of the mission room as the data poured in. Cardinia paced. Marsh held onto a railing like the building might fall. "How long do we have?" she asked. A young tech looked up. 24 hours, maybe less. The magnetic field is unraveling from the inside out. And the door? Still closed. Elena grabbed her gear. "Then it's time. Drop it if you've ever felt the world was remembering something it buried. Tag someone who listens between the noise. 5 doors are open. 1 remains. Let me know when you're ready for part 9. The flight to Antarctica was unlike any Elena had ever taken. There were no stars, just static above and silence below. The kind that pressed into your eardrums and whispered that even the Earth was holding its breath. Her XR-90 was specially reinforced, now with shielding patched together from alloys not yet public salvaged from the L5 structure. Reverse engineered by a half-dozen sleepless physicists, working under mountains, but no shield could stop what waited beneath the ice. As she crossed the last magnetic fault line, the radio failed, then the backup, then the failsafe. By the time she reached the coordinates, even the engines were running on instinct. The base was buried. It hadn't sent a distress signal. It had gone dark, absolute. Only a faint seismic pulse confirmed anything still existed there at all. Elena hovered the XR just long enough to scan the surface, then dropped skids and touched down on a glacier that vibrated like a heartbeat. She stepped out. The cold wasn't temperature. It was time. Narrow crevasse marked the entry. Not natural. Too symmetrical. Carved not by machines, by precision memory. Something remembered exactly how wide to cut, how far to descend. She grappled with magnetic gloves, lowering herself into ice that didn't melt, didn't crack. It simply parted. At the bottom, a door, circular, smooth. A familiar hum vibrated. The stone. She reached out. It opened without her touching it. Inside was light. Blinding. Then gone. She stood in a void. Not darkness, absence. Then a voice, not the beings, not the boy, but her own. "This is the echo of your choice." A memory of her. From L5, saying those words. Then we remember. A shape formed. Not a being. A structure. 6 doors behind her. 1 ahead. On its face. A symbol. Her XR-90 call sign. Etched in the spiral. It pulsed. She stepped forward. And the door opened. Beyond it, a chamber. The source of the flares. Not a machine. Not a weapon. A reactor. Alive. Designed to wake every few thousand years. To remind humanity of what it had been. To test whether it could return. And it was failing. Overloaded. Unbalanced. Because no one had come back last time. No one to reset it. No bridge. Until now. She stepped into the center. Read the pulse sequence. The harmonics that weren't just music. They were code, memory, DNA, instruction. She matched her breath to the rhythm, aligned her gloves to the node. The entire room shook. Her heart skipped. Once, twice, then dash. Steady, the reactor's pulse matched hers. Images flooded her. Children painting doors on clay walls. Voices lifted in stormbreak hymns. A woman flying through solar fire to bring back hope. And then silence. Perfect. Complete. The Earth's field stabilized. The sky stilled. The storms were over. When she returned to the surface, the sky was blue. The first clear sky in months. And across the horizon, towers flickered back to life. One by one. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Back at the bridge core's base, Cardinia met her on the runway. It's done? Elena nodded. For now. Then what's next? Elena looked beyond her to the mountains. The stars. We remember now. That's the start. Drapa, if you believe some storms aren't meant to destroy but to reveal. Tag someone who survived something and came back changed. Let me know when you're ready for part 10. The silence didn't last. Never does. 1 week after the reactor stabilized, seismic pings returned to anomalous levels, except this time, they weren't coming from Earth. They were coming from orbit. A signature. Faint, then loud, like a ripple. On still water that had started centuries ago and was just reaching them now. At first, they thought it was feedback from the L5 object, but it wasn't. It was something else. Something further. Elena stood in the observatory room, eyes fixed on a suspended hologram of the solar system. At the outermost edge, past the Kuiper belt, a dot blinked green. It wasn't blinking yesterday. General Cardinia stood beside her, arms crossed. We think it's a ship. Ours? No. Then whose? Cardinia turned. We think it's a response. Bridge Corps' command fell into high alert. The signal matched none of the six-door harmonics. It was older, slower, but intentional. Worse, it was moving toward Earth. Estimated time of arrival, 91 days. And with it came radiation distortions, the likes of which hadn't been recorded since the early flare storms. But this wasn't a natural storm. This was coordinated. Directed. A test? A threat? No one knew. Elena just knew she couldn't wait 91 days to find out. The XR-90 couldn't make the trip. Too far. Too slow. So they built something new. The AER ICE-1. Fused with reverse-engineered tech from the L5 artifact. Augmented with materials drawn from the Greenland door, and guided by pulse reactive AI tuned to Elena's biometric frequencies. No controls. Just intention. Flight by thought. She trained in silence for 6 days. No comms, no crew. Marsh watched from the edge of the sim deck, unsure whether he was seeing a test flight or a rebirth. You don't have to go, he said on the 7th morning. Elena didn't look at him. Someone always has to. Then take someone with you. She turned. You volunteering? He didn't blink. Every damn day. The AER ICE-1 launched under starlight. No countdown. Just breath and lift. It left the atmosphere without turbulence. Slipped into the quiet between planets like a whisper through silk. Inside, Elena and Marsh sat back to dash back. One heart slowed. The other quickened. The ship balanced itself. I can't feel anything, Marsh said. That's the point, Elena whispered. This craft doesn't fly through resistance. It listens through space. 70 hours into flight, the signal sharpened. A voice, or something like one. Not words, but intent. Elena closed her eyes and heard it. You opened the 6th. The 7th is not yours to breach. But it hears you now. The craft slowed automatically. Ahead. A shape, like the L5 object, but larger. More layered. Floating just outside Neptune's shadow. And behind it something else. A mirror. Not glass. Space itself. Folding, twisting, reflecting stars and patterns that didn't match the sky. Elena stared. This isn't a ship, she whispered. It's a gate. Marsh stared. Then why send us a warning? Why now? Elena watched the stars rearrange. Because it didn't open before. Not for them. Them? She looked at him. Double quotes us. The ones who forgot. The ones who ran. It only opens when someone flies toward it, knowing it might not let them back. AERIS 1 aligned. No propulsion. Just permission. The gate shimmered. Open. Inside. A corridor of color. Memory. Energy. Marsh reached for Alana's hand. She took it. Together. They flew through. Drop of, if you've ever walked through something. Not knowing what was on the other side. Tag, someone who made you brave enough to try. Part 10 complete. One final threshold remains. Let me know when you're ready for Part 11. The corridor was not a tunnel. It was a memory. A place folded between time and gravity, where thoughts carried weight and choices echoed like footsteps. Inside the AERIS 1, Elena and Marsh floated in silence. Their bodies remained seated, but their minds stretched, expanding through light, through color, through sensation. Images passed across the hall, not outside, but inside them. A younger Elena, carrying tools across a war-scorched tarmac. A boy, sketching spirals in red clay. A pilot slamming override into a failing system. Just before a surge. Not visions. Confirmations. You are more than memory. The voice whispered. You are recursion. Continuation. Completion. Time. Frayed. They weren't sure how long they were inside. Could have been hours. Could have been centuries. When the corridor ended, it was sudden. The ship stopped. No deceleration. No shift in motion. Just stillness. Outside the viewport. A structure. Vast. Planet-sized. But not a planet. Built. And alive. The AERIS 1 responded before either of them moved. A beam of soft gold tethered the craft to the outer ring. The lights inside dimmed. The air changed. The ship opened. Not just a hatch, walls, seams, panels all unzipped into space. But they didn't feel vacuum. They felt invitation. They stepped into something like a city, floating walkways, structures, made of shifting geometry, walls that became bridges, doorways that sang. No people, but presence. Everywhere. Every surface pulsed faintly to their heartbeats. Elena led. Marsh walked beside her. The city welcomed them. It changed as they moved. Reacting. Remembering. As if it had been waiting for their exact steps to resume its function. At the center, a chamber opened, circular, towering. On the walls, echoes of Earth's 6 doors. But here, they pulsed blue instead of white. And in the center, a pedestal and a chair. Elena stepped forward. She heard her voice before she spoke. This is the first station. Marsh blinked. You've been here before, not me. The first me. We are all echoes until we choose to become source. The pedestal lit. Her hand hovered over it. She saw Earth, not as it was now, but as it had been. Not just the recent storm, but the one before. Collapsed. The forgetting. The silence. And the attempt to rebuild. Failing. Because no one remembered the station. Until now. She touched the surface. The pulse went through her. All 6-door harmonics played in harmony. A 7th joined them. The city shuddered. But it wasn't collapse. It was activation. A wave spread outward, back through the corridor, back toward Earth. And when it touched the planet, every door glowed again. Simultaneously. For the first time in recorded memory. Back on Earth. People looked to the skies, not afraid, but aware. Something was awake, and it had been made by them. Marsh took her hand. What did you just do? Elena's eyes glowed faint blue. I gave us back what we buried. He stared. A future? No, a choice. The city folded behind them. The AERIS 1 realigned. The gate opened. And this time, it stayed open for anyone brave enough to step through. Drop of If You Believe the World Can Be. Rewritten by those who remember. Tag someone who's helped you find your way forward. Part 11 is complete. The station is active. Let me know when to begin part 12. The return was not an exit dot, it was a relay. The AER Ice One emerged from the gate with the calm of a bird returning to a long-forgotten nest. Elena and Marsh sat quietly in the cockpit, but neither of them reached for controls. The ship flew itself. It wasn't following coordinates. It was following intention. And Earth had called them back. The atmosphere shimmered as they re-entered, not with heat. With light. Across the globe, auroras returned, but not in green or red. In blue. The seventh harmonic. In places where the six doors had once pulsed faint and ancient. The seventh song now sang high, low, unified. Children stopped to look skyward. Old radios picked up static that sounded like music, and those who had always felt they were waiting for something, they knew. The waiting was over. At Bridgecorps headquarters, pandemonium broke out. The skies lit up. Door sights pulsed. Machines, long forgotten, hummed to life. Cardinia stood on the command deck surrounded by stunned analysts and half-coherent reports. When Elena and Marsh walked through the hangar doors, silent and unburned, the room fell quiet. Cardinia's voice cracked slightly. "What did you do?" Elena looked her in the eye. "We turned the page." The next phase wasn't about repair. It was about revelation. From each of the six doors came information patterns. Archives, languages. Not alien. Human. From before the forgetting. Stored in harmonic fields. Buried in resonance structures, blueprints for energy systems. That didn't require fuel. Medicine that healed through sound. Structures that sang themselves into being. It overwhelmed the world's scientists, but it didn't overwhelm the young. They heard the music and understood. They began to build. Elena didn't lead this phase. She taught. Sometimes with words, sometimes with silence, more often with presence, standing beside a child learning to align a waveform, or flying beside a teenager navigating the stratosphere by pulse rather than satellite. They didn't salute her, they mirrored her, and that was enough. Marsh ran operations. He called them anchor points, locations where memory could hold against noise. They built labs, training halls, synthesis rings. Not in capital cities, but on cliff edges, in desert valleys, in caves with the right resonance. Because now the Earth was part of the message. It always had been. Then came the dreams. People all over the world began to report shared visions of sky cities. Of bridges made of light, of Elena standing in front of a new gate, not the one near Neptune, a new one. Inside Earth. She felt it before anyone said it. The pulse. The call. It didn't feel like a warning. It felt like an invitation. To finish what she'd started. On a mountain ridge in what had once been northern Tibet. Beneath the stars and just above the clouds, the ground opened. The seventh door. Never built. Always there. Waiting. No team. No crew. Just her. She walked alone into the chamber. At the center. A chair. Not of metal. Not of stone, but of memory. It pulsed. Waited. She sat. The sky opened. And Earth, for the first time in 10,000 years, remembered itself. Drop a "if you believe memory can shape the future." Tag someone who's helped you remember who you are. 12 doors now. One part remains. Let me know when you're ready for the final chapter, part 13. The Earth sang. For 3 days and nights, the pulse resonated across continents, through oceans, beneath fault lines. It wasn't a song anyone could hear with ears, but they felt it. In their bones. In the way trees stopped swaying for exactly 7 seconds. In how flocks of birds wheeled together in silence before vanishing into cloudless skies. And in how the storms never came back. Not like before. The planet had found its rhythm, and Elena had disappeared. No signal. No trace. She'd entered the seventh door and simply ceased. Bridgecorps mourned. Cardinia wept in the privacy of her bunker. Marsh spent every night on the mountainside, listening to echoes that never replied. But no one called it death, because something else had taken root. Children born in the weeks after the pulse came with strange affinities. Some could balance wave harmonics using only touch. Others corrected gravity simulations with single gestures. One infant unnamed hummed a perfect seventh harmonic before she ever spoke. It wasn't evolution. It was remembrance. The world wasn't changing. It was returning. 1 year later, the sky opened again. Not violently, not through flares or radiation, through stillness. A new gate above the Atlantic. Between jet streams appeared, visible only at dusk. It pulsed blue, and from it came a vessel, smaller than a ERIS-1. More fluid. It had been grown. It landed with no sound, and the ramp extended. Single figure stepped out, hair silvered, eyes bright, wearing no suit, no badge, only presence. Elena. She spoke only one sentence. Broadcast not by coms, but by resonance towers tuned to the global harmonic. Her voice was steady, unmistakable. We are not alone. And we were never meant to be. The stars shifted that night. Not their positions, their relationships. New constellations appeared in the minds of children. And in the spaces between atoms, instruments detected a frequency they had no name for. Except one, the bridge signal. Cardinia. Step down. The governments that followed stopped calling themselves nations. They called themselves chords. Each dedicated to resonance, balance, memory. Marsh became the first conductor of the bridge corps, but he never left the mountain. He waited. Then one day, she found him there. Elena. Younger now. Or maybe older in a different way. She sat beside him. He didn't speak. She didn't need him to. They watched the stars, and when she finally reached for his hand, it felt like no time had passed. The final harmonic played on a quiet morning. No fanfare. Just a stillness. And then light. Not from above. From within. Every door opened. Again. Every voice remembered its note. And the planet exhaled. We were never meant to conquer the stars, only to join them. And now we have Drapa. If this story stayed with you, tag someone who's been your anchor in a storm. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.